This week, we look at the financial reforms taking place at the Vatican, the Pope's push for peace, and we look at the impact of World Youth Day Rio. Hello and welcome to this new season of Vatican Connections. We're going to take a look today at what's been happening over the summer and look forward at what's coming. Traditionally, summer in Rome is dreadfully quiet and most Vaticanistas take their holidays in July and August. Not this year. Pope Francis decided to work through the summer. The only concession he made was canceling his general audiences for the month of August, and his daily masses were kept private. Otherwise, he went full steam ahead. The summer started with the blockbuster announcement that John Paul II and John XXIII will be made saints. Pope Francis is holding a consistory at the end of this month to discuss the canonization date with the College of Cardinals. We'll have that announcement for you as soon as it's made, of course. On the same day, Pope Francis released his first encyclical, Lumen Fide, the Light of Faith. He was very open about the fact that Pope Benedict XVI began writing the encyclical before he announced his resignation, and indeed he wrote most of it. Pope Francis just put the finishing touches on the document. Financial matters took center stage over the summer. Pope Francis told reporters returning from World Youth Day in Brazil that he didn't intend to deal with the Vatican Bank and related issues so soon, but things came up and reform became urgent. Now, one of those things was the arrest of Monsignor Nunzio Scarano on charges of fraud, corruption, and slander. Scarano was an accountant with the Vatican office that oversees property and investments. He had already been under investigation by the Vatican, and his accounts had been frozen. Following that unfortunate turn of events, Pope Francis issued several financial-related decisions. He announced the creation of a pontifical commission to oversee the financial security of the Holy See, and he decreed that anti-money laundering rules will apply to all Vatican-based organizations, not just those strictly dealing with finances and property. Another big issue that continues to draw attention is Syria. A well-known Jesuit who lived in Syria for 30 years went missing in July, and his condition is still unknown. Father Paolo Dalloglio lived at the monastery of St. Moses the Abyssinian, helping rebuild that community. Now, he had been expelled by the Syrian government last year, but re-entered the country in late July of this year. There are conflicting reports about his fate, and the Italian government is still trying to verify his condition. As the situation in Syria becomes tense and the United States pushes for military action, Pope Francis remains staunchly opposed to such action.
Finisca il rumore delle armi. La guerra segna sempre il fallimento della pace. È sempre una sconfitta per l'umanità. Risuonino ancora una volta le parole di Paolo VI. Non più gli uni contro gli altri, non più, mai, non più la guerra, non più la guerra. La pace si afferma solo con la pace. La pace si afferma solo con la pace. Quella non disgiunta dai doveri della giustizia, ma alimentata dal sacrificio proprio, dalla clemenza, dalla misericordia, dalla carità. Fratelli e sorelle, perdono, dialogo, riconciliazione sono le parole della pace. Nella amata nazione siriana, nel Medio Oriente, in tutto il mondo. Preghiamo questa sera per la riconciliazione e per la pace. Lavoriamo per la riconciliazione e per la pace. E diventiamo tutti, in ogni ambiente, uomini e donne di riconciliazione e di pace. Così sia.
Of course, everyone has also been eagerly watching for anything that might be a sign of changes to come. When the Vatican announced that Pope Francis would meet with the heads of various Vatican departments, the media went wild. But it was a closed-door meeting, meaning no photos, no video, and no detailed transcript. The Vatican's spokesperson, Father Federico Lombardi, issued a statement after the meeting saying only that the meeting lasted 3 hours, the Pope gave a brief greeting, and the rest of the time was taken up by remarks from other participants. The Pope will meet with the 8 cardinals he appointed to act as his advisory panel in early October. World Youth Day Rio was, of course, the event of the summer, and we'll take a closer look at that coming right up. Vatican Connections is interactive. Send us your questions or comments by Facebook, Twitter, email, or post. Via email, send comments to info@saltandlighttv.org. And by post, send letters to 114 Richmond Street East, Toronto, Ontario, N5C121, Canada. The event of the summer was undoubtedly World Youth Day in Rio de Janeiro. Over 3 million people took part in the final Mass on Copacabana Beach, and more than that, watched the Pope's every move throughout the week. But what makes young people so eager to take part in World Youth Day? I mean, they spend nearly 2 weeks traveling, and the experience is not exactly like going on a fully escorted 5-star tour. So Catholic News Service spoke to some pilgrims just as they arrived in Brazil.
This is my 5th World Youth Day. I went to Rome in 2000, Cologne, Germany in 2005, Sydney, Australia, 2008, Madrid, Spain, 2011, and Rio in 2013. It's the experience of seeing this many Catholic pilgrims from all over the world come to one city with one belief and be able to experience the culture, the religion. You get to meet people from all over, and it's a life-changing experience.
The reason why I wanted to come here is because, so back home I go to a private Catholic school, but despite it being like a Catholic school, there aren't that many practicing Catholics there, and I really wanted to find people my own age to like believe the same things as me. And my parents were like, at World Youth Day, there'll be millions of people who feel the same way as you do.
This is my first World Youth Day, and I wanted to see what the rest of the Catholic Church is like outside of the United States. And I feel like in the United States, there might be a lot of practicing Catholics, but you don't hear it or see it or witness it out just living your everyday life.
I'm waiting for that feeling that you get in your heart and you can just feel the love everywhere. That was really cheesy, but it's so true. Like, that's what I'm looking forward to the most.
World Youth Day is for young people, but it's also put together in large part by young people. Volunteer staff are recruited from around the world to work with the local organizing committee. They're housed with local families who open their homes to act as host families, and those international volunteers quickly become a part of the community. Catholic News Service found out more about how this works.
Muchas veces buscas la felicidad donde no está.
You often look for happiness where it can't be found, and then you realize that through your faith, through religion, through living with people who share your faith, happiness comes automatically. It overcomes barriers of language and culture so that everyone is in sync.
Todos estar en una misma sintonía. Estoy aquí para poner mis
I'm here to put my gifts towards serving World Youth Day, to work as an international volunteer and give everything that I have learned in school and work, as much or as little as it may be, to support World Youth Day.
Apoyar con eso a la JMJ.
Nós somos católicos e
We are Catholics, and we know that we profess a faith that requires actions. The Church needs works. So this is a way of making a small contribution as Catholics and also a chance to have a cultural exchange.
para troca de cultura, né?
During my time here in Rio de Janeiro, I have come to see that the church is very different. This is why they call it charismatic. They dance, sing. The Mass is longer, and in Mexico is not. In Mexico, we still have a traditional style of carrying out the Mass. The priests are serious, but not here. Here, the priests even have to sing well, because they're expected to entertain. So it's a different way of living the faith, but we all go to the same place, and we all have the same motivation, the same reason, which is the passion of Christ.
Brazilians have a lot of faith. They are Catholics, but I think that the faith of Catholics in Rio de Janeiro is sleeping a bit.
I think that hosting pilgrims is a big commitment, no? The host families open their doors. They treat you very well and make you part of their family. But they are helping because they know that we volunteers have come to help. They know that the impact of World Youth Day will last in the hearts of each pilgrim that comes to Rio. Having more than 2 million good people here has to leave a mark on the city.
Tiene que dejar una huella en la ciudad.
Despite technically being on summer holidays, Pope Francis kept a fairly full schedule. In early July, he paid a visit to Lampedusa, Italy. The tiny island is located in the Mediterranean Sea, about 113 kilometers north of Tunisia. Refugees fleeing African nations often end up on Lampedusa because of its proximity to the African continent. Too often, would-be migrants lose their lives trying to reach the island. Now, one such incident occurred in mid-June, prompting Pope Francis to visit the island to bear witness to the tragic plight of refugees, a plight that too often goes unnoticed. Before speaking publicly, the Pope prayed silently and tossed a wreath of flowers into the sea in memory of the nameless migrants who have lost their lives trying to reach Italy. He celebrated Mass wearing the purple vestments normally used during Lent and used prayers from the Mass for the forgiveness of sins. He said the deaths of migrants is a thorn in his heart and spurred him to try to raise awareness. He also said we have lost a sense of fraternal responsibility, and the globalization of the world's economy has led to a globalization of indifference. To drive home the message that Catholics should be paying more attention to the poorest, weakest, and marginalized, Pope Francis visited the Jesuit Run Centro Stali, which provides assistance for refugees living in Rome. On a lighter note, Pope Francis had a special audience with a group of soccer players from Argentina and Italy this summer. Now, they were in town just before playing a friendly game in Rome. Pope Francis told the men that they are role models for many people and they should remember that in their behavior on and off the field. He also told the team managers and coaches that sport must remain sport, even if a big business has evolved around the game. He also recalled that his happiest childhood memories involved going to watch soccer games with his family. Each team presented the Holy Father with a gift, and he told them it would be a difficult game to watch because he didn't know who he should cheer for. The Pope also met with the priests of the Diocese of Rome, and as he often reminds everyone, he is the Bishop of Rome. Catholic News Service has more on that meeting.
Acting in his capacity as Bishop of Rome, Pope Francis visited his Cathedral of St. John Lateran September 16 to address and answer questions from diocesan clergy. The Pope devoted the first part of the 2-hour meeting to answering a letter he had received a few days earlier from one of the city's parish priests who had written about his struggles in carrying out his vocation of pastor.
Bella lettera. Sono stato commosso. Lettera semplice, un prete maturo condivideva con me un suo sentimento. La fatica.
The Pope urged priests to draw consolation from great figures in the Bible, including St. John the Baptist and the Virgin Mary, who overcame great tribulation through faith. Later, the Pope took questions from 5 of the assembled priests, addressing some of the Church's gravest problems, including the clergy's sex abuse crisis. The Church will not collapse, he assured his audience, because sanctity is stronger than scandal, and the Church is blessed with living saints today. As on other occasions, Pope Francis urged priests to be more welcoming to lay people, for example by scheduling marriage preparation classes at more convenient times. In an answer to a question about possible reforms of the process for marriage annulments, the Pope said that he would discuss the matter with his so-called Group of 8 cardinal advisors when they meet at the Vatican at the beginning of October.
Pope Francis also had one private but noteworthy meeting. On September 11th, he met with Father Gustavo Gutierrez at the Santa Marta residence. Now, Father Gutierrez is 85 years old, and he is considered the father of liberation theology. He also co-authored a book about liberation theology with Gerhard Müller, the current head of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith. It's important to note that Gutierrez was never sanctioned by the Vatican, although he was asked to correct 2 of his books. Episcopal appointments also continued throughout this summer. Now, last season, we noticed that a good portion of the appointments were happening in Argentina, and that continues. So far, La Rioja, San Carlos de Bariloche, Oran, and Rafaela got new bishops. Most notably, Pope Francis appointed one of his former auxiliary bishops, Luis Fernandez Alara, to the Diocese of Rafaela, and the former Under-Secretary to the Executive Committee of the Argentine Episcopal Conference, Father Gustavo Zanqueta. Last spring, we were also looking at the Archdiocese of St. Andrews and Edinburgh in Scotland. Cardinal Keith O'Brien resigned after allegations of inappropriate conduct surfaced there. In late July, Pope Francis appointed Leo Cushley, the new Archbishop of the Scottish Archdiocese. Archbishop Cushley has told media his first priority is to rebuild trust with the clergy. There were also appointments within the Vatican walls. We were all waiting with bated breath to see what would happen at the Secretariat of State. Pope Francis appointed Archbishop Pietro Parolin to take over as Secretary of State. The appointment takes effect October 15th. Cardinal Tarcisio Bertone served in this position since 2006, and he is 78 years old now, so he is 3 years past the mandatory retirement age. So this change in government was going to happen sooner or later, regardless of the Pope. On the same day the announcement was made about the Vatican's so-called Prime Minister, the Vatican also announced that Pope Francis has confirmed the heads of different sections of the Secretariat of State in their jobs. So, Archbishop Giovanni Becciu, Archbishop Dominique Mamberti, Monsignor Peter Wells, and Monsignor Antoine Camilleri, as well as Archbishop Georg Ganswein, all keep their jobs. Archbishop Georg Ganswein, of course, is head of the papal household. A new secretary was also appointed for the Pontifical Commission Ecclesia Dei. Archbishop Guido Pozzo is the new secretary of this commission, which was created by John Paul II in 1988 to bring the Society of Pius X and its members back into full communion with Rome. On today's Roman Profile, we're looking at a little-known cardinal who had a big influence on many areas of the Church. Cardinal Celso Costantini was born in 1878. He was ordained to the priesthood in 1899 and then rose through the ranks. He served as a chaplain to the Italian army during World War I and a vicar for his home diocese. He was also the first papal representative to China. I sat down with Monsignor Bruno Pin, who has studied the life and the writings of Cardinal Costantini to find out just why he was so extraordinary.
Lui anticipò in molti campi il tempo, ad esempio nell'ambito della cosiddetta decolonizzazione. Già negli anni *20 lui vide l'importanza di togliere dall'orbita delle potenze coloniali in Cina la Chiesa cattolica e quindi anticipò quella che era poi la colonizzazione di carattere, la decolonizzazione di carattere culturale, di carattere economico, di carattere politico, almeno una ventina, trentina d'anni.
Costantini's mission in China was considered impossible, yet he succeeded in establishing formal diplomatic relations and, more importantly, a local church.
Si realizzò perché riuscì a impiantare per la prima volta la Chiesa cattolica in Cina, decolonizzandola, togliendola cioè dall'influenza delle potenze coloniali, ma anche creando i primi vescovi cinesi, i sacerdoti cinesi, la Congregatio Discipulorum Domini cinese, con istituto religioso cinese, e poi naturalmente tramite l'inculturazione cristiana, cioè lui diceva bisogna incarnare. I missionari finora hanno portato in Cina il cristianesimo tenendolo in vasi. Noi dobbiamo piantarlo nel terreno perché diventi una piantagione, in modo che fosse radicato. E in effetti, proprio per questo, con l'avvento della rivoluzione maoista, comunista, il cristianesimo non poté essere sradicato.
It was that call for decolonization that eventually made it necessary for the Vatican to pull Costantini out of China. The colonial powers were upset. He ended up as the secretary at Propaganda Fide during World War II, living in Rome during the Nazi occupation of the city. He kept a diary that was eventually found in his diocese archive and published in 2009 with the permission of the Holy See.
In questo diario conosciamo qual è la posizione, le valutazioni della sede apostolica nei confronti delle potenze dell'asse, nazismo, fascismo, ma anche degli alleati, poiché allora le espressioni del Papa, ma anche della Curia romana, dovevano essere di estrema prudenza, proprio per non urtare. Invece qui conosciamo quali erano le vere posizioni e valutazioni. In secondo luogo, Costantini rivela come il pontefice operò per la pace in modo, parlo di Pio XII e anche tutta la Curia romana, e non riuscendo a ottenere in qualche modo la pace prima che si concludesse la guerra, operò a livello di azione umanitaria in modo unico nel mondo. E lui stesso si adoperò tantissimo per salvare questi che erano, come dire, in una situazione disastrata a Roma, ebrei e non ebrei di qualsiasi etnia o provenienza politica. Ma al di là di questa azione umanitaria si nota anche in Costantini e attraverso lui nel Papa Pio XII, che viene riflesso nel diario, si nota tutta la preparazione che c'è per il dopoguerra, per una pacificazione, per una costruzione di un mondo sulla base di un ordine democratico che rispetti i diritti umani, che è fondamentale, tra cui la libertà religiosa.
Costantini's abilities extended beyond diplomacy and ministry. He was an accomplished artist to whom others turned for advice on sacred art.
Costantini è l'uomo che nella Chiesa cattolica influì più di tutti nel secolo scorso nel rinnovamento dell'arte cristiana e dell'arte sacra. Più di tutti perché lui aveva il famoso trinomio, l'arte legata alla fede e legata alle varie culture. Quindi l'errore grave di importare, per esempio in Cina o altrove in Africa, l'arte europea, perché è un'arte falsa. Quindi influì, io credo, con questa felice intuizione che l'arte legata alla fede e alle culture, al plurale, veramente è la strada maestra per anche l'evangelizzazione della Chiesa Cattolica.
And that's it for our first edition of Vatican Connections of our new season. Now, next week, of course, is the consistory where Pope Francis will decide on the date for the canonization of John Paul II and John XXIII. It is widely anticipated that the canonization will take place on April 27th, 2014, which will also be Divine Mercy Sunday. Of course, we'll be watching that consistory and we'll bring you the details as soon as we have them. Next week, we will also look towards Pope Francis's visit to Assisi. That's it for this time. Thanks for watching and see you next week.